The crystal chandelier, a galaxy of 1,000 glittering tears, watched in silence. Declan Shaw, a man who built an empire from folly and audacity, stood between two women. On one side, his wife Rowena, the silent architect of his world, her elegance a quiet rebuke to the room's noise. On the other, Kendra Lowell, a siren in crimson silk, her smile as sharp and brilliant as a shard of glass. The air crackled with unspoken wars, the scent of expensive perfume mingling with pure venom. And then a sound that cut through the symphony of clinking glasses and polite laughter, the sharp, ugly crack of a hand striking flesh. For a moment, the world stopped. Declan had made his choice, and in that single brutal act, he hadn't just broken a vow. He had ignited a fire that would burn his kingdom to the ground. The Shaw Foundation's annual charity gala was the glittering pinnacle of the city's social calendar. Held in the grand ballroom of the St. Regis, it was an event Declan Shaw orchestrated with the same ruthless precision he applied to his tech company, Shaw Innovations. Tonight was not just about philanthropy. It was about power. It was a spectacle, and every person present was either an asset, a pawn, or an audience member. Declan, dressed in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, moved through the crowd like a shark, his smile wide, but his eyes constantly calculating. His wife Rowena was the picture of grace by his side, or at least that was her designated position. She wore a deep navy gown by Carolina Herrera that complemented her quiet dignity. She had designed their life with the same meticulous attention to detail she applied to her architectural blueprints, cool, minimalist, and aesthetically perfect from a distance. Their penthouse, the sleek glass and steel headquarters of Shaw Innovations, even the very flow of this gala, all bore her invisible signature. She was the foundation upon which Declan had built his public image, the bedrock he never acknowledged. For the past year, however, a crack had been spreading through that foundation, and its name was Kendra Lowell. Kendra was everything Rowena was, not loud, ostentatious, and ravenous for the spotlight. A social media influencer, with millions of followers, she documented every lavish gift Declan bestowed upon her, every exotic trip they took. She was his midlife crisis, rendered in flesh and blood, a public declaration of his own perceived virility and power. Tonight, Kendra had broken the unspoken rule. She wasn't just a rumored affair. She was here a guest at his wife's table wearing a blood-red Valentino dress that screamed for attention. She sat directly across from Rowena, her gaze a constant insolent challenge. Declan, basking in the danger, placed Kendra to his right, a place of honor, while Rowena, his wife of 12 years, was seated to his left. The slight was deliberate, a public demotion. Rowena endured it with a practiced stillness, her spine straight, her expression a mask of serene neutrality. She spoke politely to the guests on her other side, discussing art with Mr. Abernathy from the museum board and urban planning with a city councilwoman. But she felt every smirk from Kendra, every possessive touch Declan gave his mistress's arm. She saw the pitying glances from old friends, the gleeful whispers from her rivals. Her table was an island of exquisite tension in a sea of feigned civility. The flashpoint came during the dessert course. Declan, his senses dulled by several glasses of Dom Perignon, was regaling the table with a story about a recent hostile takeover. "You have to be ruthless," he boomed, his voice carrying. "You see what you want and you take it. No apologies, no hesitation. Hesitation is death." He squeezed Kendra's shoulder, his eyes locking with hers in a moment of shared predatory understanding. Kendra, emboldened, leaned forward, Declan knows exactly what he wants, she said, her voice a purr that was aimed directly at Rowena. He's not a man who settles for antiques. A collective sharp intake of breath went around the table. The insult was so brazen, so direct, it was breathtaking. Mr. Abernathy choked on his coffee. The councilwoman suddenly found the ceiling architecture fascinating. Rowena's composure finally fractured. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cause a scene. She simply turned her head slowly, her cool grey eyes fixing on her husband. "Declan," she said, her voice low but clear as a bell, "I think your guest has had too much to drink. Perhaps it's time for her to leave." The challenge was laid. It was a simple request for marital decorum, a last-ditch appeal to the man she had once loved, the partner she had helped build. He had to choose the dignity of his wife or the ego of his mistress. Declan's face flushed with alcohol and arrogance darkened. Kendra saw her opportunity. Her eyes welled with crocodile tears. "Declan, she's being so cruel to me," she whimpered, laying a hand on his chest. "I didn't mean anything by it." "She started it," Declan growled, turning on Rowena. "You and your damn Ice Queen act. You think you're so much better than everyone, don't you? You stand there judging me, judging her. I am asking you as your wife to maintain a shred of decency in public," Rowena replied, her voice trembling slightly, but her gaze unwavering. "Your wife?" Declan laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You're a contract, a piece of the furniture. Don't you dare tell me what to do." He was standing now, looming over her. The entire ballroom seemed to have fallen silent, all eyes drawn to the unfolding drama. Kendra watched with a triumphant smirk dancing on her lips. This was it, the final public humiliation that would sever the last tie. "Don't speak to me like that, Declan," Rowena warned, her own anger finally rising to the surface. "Not here. Not ever." "I'll speak to you however I want," he roared. To please Kendra, to assert his dominance, to shatter the last vestige of Rowena's composure, he did the unthinkable. He raised his hand. The sound of his palm connecting with her cheek echoed in the cavernous room. It was sharp, definitive, and utterly shocking. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rowena stumbled back in her chair, her hand flying to her face, not from the pain, but from the sheer, soul-crushing humiliation. The world narrowed to a pinpoint of ringing silence in her ears. Declan stood over her, breathing heavily, his chest puffed out. He looked at Kendra, who gave him a small, adoring nod. He had performed for her. He had proven his ruthlessness. He looked back down at Rowena, expecting tears, pleading, or a dramatic exit. Instead, he saw nothing. Her eyes, once full of cool fire, were now utterly empty. The woman he knew, the partner he had relied on, the architect of his success, had vanished. In her place was a stranger, her face a pale, still mask marked by the red imprint of his hand. Slowly, deliberately, Rowena stood up. She straightened her gown, picked up her clutch from the table, and without a single word, turned and walked away. She didn't run. She didn't cry. Her footsteps were measured and silent on the marble floor as she walked through the parted sea of shocked faces, her back ramrod straight, and disappeared through the grand archway, leaving behind the ruins of her life. The cold night air was a shock to Rowena's burning cheek. The valet, a young man named Leo with kind eyes, rushed forward, his face a mask of concern. "Mrs. Shaw, are you all right? Shall I get your car?" Rowena simply nodded, the effort of speech seeming monumental. The world outside the hotel was a blur of headlights and city noise, a stark contrast to the suspended silence she had left behind. In the bubble of the gala, time had stopped. Out here, it rushed forward, carrying her away from the life she had just lost. Leo brought her Mercedes-Benz S-Class around its pearlescent white finish, gleaming under the streetlights. He held the door open for her, his gaze carefully averted from her face. As she slid into the driver's seat, the familiar scent of leather and her subtle Joe Malone perfume felt alien-like artifacts from another person's existence. "Thank you, Leo," she managed to whisper. She drove not towards the sterile, minimalist penthouse she shared with Declan, but aimlessly through the neon-lit canyons of the city. Each traffic light was a suspended moment of reflection. The slap wasn't just an act of violence. It was a final, brutal confirmation of a truth she had been avoiding for years. Declan didn't just disrespect her. He despised her. He despised her quiet competence, her intellect, that he could never match her grace, that highlighted his own crudeness. She was a beautiful, functional piece of his empire that had begun to remind him of his own inadequacies. Her mind, usually a precise and orderly place of angles and load-bearing calculations, was a maelstrom of shame, fury, and a terrifying, liberating clarity. The humiliation had burned away the last vestiges of her love, leaving behind something harder, colder. It was the same feeling as when a flawed design was demolished, clearing the way for something new, something stronger. An hour later, she found herself pulling up to the curb outside their penthouse building, the Shaw Tower. She didn't go in through the grand lobby. Instead, she used her private key card to access a service elevator, bypassing the doorman and their inevitable questions. The penthouse was silent and vast, a mausoleum of their dead marriage. Her design, all white marble, floor-to-ceiling glass, and stark, empty spaces, had once felt serene. Now it felt like a prison of her own making. She walked past the walk-in closet, filled with designer clothes Declan had bought her, past the velvet-lined safe, containing millions in jewelry. She ignored it all. Possessions were his language, not hers. She went to the Home Office, a space she had designed for both of them, but had long since ceded to him. On the wall was a framed original draft of the Shaw Innovations headquarters, her design, her elegant lines and innovative use of space that had won her the prestigious Pritzker Architecture Prize nomination years ago, a nomination she withdrew from to support Declan's burgeoning company. He had taken the credit, of course, referring to it as the product of my design team. She opened a discreet built-in panel in the wall, revealing a fireproof safe. Her fingerprints, then a code, opened it with a soft click. Inside were not jewels, but her life's work. Original blueprints. Notebooks filled with her theories on sustainable urban design and a single unassuming leather-bound portfolio. It contained the intellectual property patents for her signature architectural systems, including the unique structural and energy-efficient designs that were the very bones of the Shaw Tower and the company headquarters. She also took a slim file folder. Inside was a copy of their prenuptial agreement, which she had her own lawyer, a formidable woman named Evelyn Albright, draft 12 years ago. Declan, in his arrogance, had barely glanced at it, so eager was he to protect his then modest assets. But Evelyn had insisted on a very specific clause, an intellectual and creative property addendum. It stipulated that all architectural designs, patents and creative concepts conceived by Rowena, even those used for Declan's businesses, remained her sole and exclusive property. At the time, it seemed like a formality. Now it was a weapon. She packed a single small suitcase with essentials and the portfolio. As she walked through the living room, her eyes fell upon a photograph on the mantelpiece, the two of them on their wedding day, young, hopeful. Declan was smiling, but even then his hand on her waist was more of a grip of possession than an embrace. With a chilling calm, she picked up the heavy silver frame, walked to the waste chute, and dropped it in. The sound of it clattering down 30 floors was deeply, profoundly satisfying. She took the service elevator back down, got into her car, and drove away from the gleaming tower that bore his name, but was built from her soul. She didn't know where she was going at first, only that she was moving away from the blast radius. Then a destination surfaced in her mind, a place of refuge, a place that was hers alone. The rage was subsiding, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. Declan believed he had broken her. He thought she was a fragile ornament he could discard. He had forgotten who she was. He had forgotten that an architect knows exactly where the load-bearing walls are, and she knew with absolute certainty how to bring his entire structure crashing down. Rowena drove for nearly an hour, leaving the polished, affluent heart of the city for the grittier, more vibrant arts district. She pulled onto a quiet side street, lined with converted warehouses and old brick buildings, stopping in front of a nondescript iron gate. Using an old key, she opened it and drove into a small private courtyard. Here stood a 3-story brick building, a former textile mill she had bought for a pittance in her 20s, long before Declan. It was her first solo project. She had converted the top floor into a residential loft for herself, and leased the bottom 2 floors to artists and artisans. When she married Declan, she had moved out, but she never sold it. It was her secret foothold, a piece of her past she had refused to let go of. The loft was just as she had left it, covered in a thin layer of dust. It was the antithesis of the penthouse, warm with exposed brick walls, old wooden beams and shelves overflowing with books on art history and engineering. A massive drafting table, its surface scarred with the ghosts of 1,000 designs, stood by the arched window, overlooking the city skyline from a different, humbler perspective. This place was her. It smelled of old paper turpentine and dust, the scent of creation. She dropped her small suitcase, the sound echoing in the quiet space. For the first time since the slap, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of the night. A single hot tear traced a path through the dust on her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of release. She was shedding a skin, a life, a name. Here she wasn't Mrs. Shaw. She was Rowena. She spent the first few hours in a daze of activity. She opened the windows, letting the cool night air chase away the staleness. She brewed a pot of strong black tea, the ritual grounding her. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat at her old drafting table, her fingers tracing the nicks and grooves in the wood. She had designed her future here once. She would do it again. She opened the leather portfolio, spreading the patents and blueprints across the table under the warm glow of a lamp. She studied the intricate details of the Shaw Innovations headquarters, the building that was the physical heart of Declan's empire. She knew its every secret, every strength, and every vulnerability. Declan saw it as a symbol of his power. She saw it as a complex system of interconnected dependencies, and she knew exactly which one to pull to make the whole thing collapse. The sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The city was waking up, oblivious to the war that was about to begin. With the morning light came a renewed sense of purpose. Rowena picked up her phone. It was flooded with missed calls and frantic texts from Declan, from concerned friends, from her mother. She ignored them all. She scrolled through her contacts to a name she hadn't called in almost 5 years. The contact was listed simply as G. Kincaid. She checked the time. It would be late afternoon in London. She pressed the call button. It rang 3 times before a deep, calm voice answered. "Rowena, is everything all right?" There was no surprise, only a thread of immediate concern. Gideon Kincaid. They had been rivals and friends at the Bartlett School of Architecture in London, the 2 brightest stars of their graduating class. He was brilliant, fiercely competitive, but always fair. He had respected her talent more than anyone, even Declan. While she had stepped back to build Declan's world, Gideon had gone on to create his own empire. Kincaid Global was now one of the world's largest and most innovative real estate development and investment firms, a behemoth that made Shaw Innovations look like a provincial startup. They had kept in touch sporadically, a Christmas card here, a congratulatory email there. But a deep, unspoken professional respect always remained. "Gideon," she said, her voice steadier than she expected, "I need your help. Or rather, I have a business proposal for you." There was a pause on the line. "I'm listening," he said, his tone shifting from personal concern to professional acuity. Rowena took a deep breath. "I'm leaving Declan," she stated the words, solidifying the decision. "He's become untenable." She didn't elaborate on the events of the previous night. She didn't need to. Gideon was smart enough to read between the lines. "I'm sorry to hear that, Rowena. Truly," he said, his voice laced with genuine sympathy. "What's the proposal?" "Shaw Innovations. Its headquarters, the flagship building on Grand Avenue." She began, her voice gaining strength, the familiar language of her profession, a comfort. "As you know, I was the lead architect. What you don't know is that I hold the exclusive intellectual property patents for the building's core structural systems and its proprietary energy-efficient curtain wall. According to a clause in my prenup, those rights are mine alone, non-transferable." She could almost hear the gears turning in Gideon's mind, thousands of miles away. "That's an incredible oversight on his part," he murmured, a hint of admiration in his voice. "Declan's arrogance has always been his greatest liability," Rowena said coolly. "He saw my work as his property, just like he saw me. He never read the fine print. The licensing agreement for the use of my patents was contingent on the continuation of our marriage and my role within the company, a role he effectively eliminated last night. So technically," Gideon deduced, his voice quickening with excitement, "Shaw Innovations is currently in massive multi-billion-dollar patent infringement." "Precisely," Rowena confirmed. "Operating illegally in a building they don't have the right to use. A lawsuit would freeze their operations. The PR fallout would be catastrophic. The stock would plummet. It would be a death blow." "You want to sue him into oblivion," Gideon stated. "No," Rowena corrected him. "That's Declan's way. Brute force. I have a more elegant design. I don't just want to destroy him. I want to build something new from the wreckage. This is where you come in. Kincaid Global has been looking to expand its tech portfolio and establish a stronger North American presence." Gideon was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was charged with energy. "You're not just offering me a lawsuit. You're offering me leverage for a hostile takeover, with you as the fulcrum." "I'm offering you the keys to the kingdom, Gideon," she said. "Shaw Innovations at a steep discount with its biggest liability, transformed into its greatest asset. I want a seat on the new board. I want to head a new division of architectural and sustainable design funded by the acquisition. I want to build my own legacy, not just be a footnote in his." The line went quiet again. Rowena waited, her heart pounding. This was the biggest gamble of her life. "When do you plan to make your move?" Gideon finally asked. "Today," Rowena replied without hesitation. "Declan thinks I'm hiding, broken and crying. He's about to find out what a woman with nothing left to lose is capable of." "Book my flight," Gideon Kincaid said. "I'll be on the next plane out of Heathrow. And Rowena, welcome back." When she hung up the phone, the sun was fully above the horizon. Rowena looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the window. The ghost of a bruise was starting to form on her cheek, a faint violet shadow. It wasn't a mark of shame. It was a battle scar. The war had begun. While Rowena was rediscovering her strength, Declan Shaw was waking up to a world he believed he still controlled. He awoke in their penthouse, the sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a brutal headache pounding behind his eyes. The space beside him in the king-sized bed was cold and empty. He grunted, a flicker of annoyance passing through him before it was replaced by a surge of righteousness. She'd deserved it. She had embarrassed him, challenged him in front of his friends, his associates, and most importantly in front of Kendra. He had simply put her back in her place. He reached for his phone, expecting a string of apologetic texts of pleas for forgiveness. Instead, there were only the frantic, unanswered messages he'd sent in a drunken haze after returning from the gala. A wave of fury washed over him. The audacity of her to not come crawling back. His phone rang, and Kendra's picture flashed on the screen. He answered, his voice a low growl. "What? Good morning, my tiger." Kendra cooed, her voice sickly sweet. "Is the Ice Queen still hiding in her room?" "She's gone," Declan snapped, packed a bag and left. "Oh no." "The poor thing," Kendra said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Well, don't you worry. It's for the best. Now you're free. We can finally be together properly. No more hiding." She paused, then added, "I'm on my way up. I'll make you breakfast. We should celebrate your liberation." An hour later, Kendra was flitting around his kitchen wearing one of his expensive dress shirts and not much else, making a mess while trying to cook omelets. The smell of burning butter filled the air. Declan sat at the marble island, nursing a strong black coffee, trying to ignore the gnawing unease in the pit of his stomach. "Don't worry about her deck," Kendra said, sliding a slightly burnt omelette onto a plate. "Where's she going to go? Back to her mother's?" "She has nothing without you. The credit cards, the house, the car, it's all in your name. She'll come back in a day or two, tail between her legs." This soothed his ego. Kendra was right. Rowena was a creature of comfort and luxury. She couldn't survive without the world he provided. He had created her, and he could uncreate her. "I'm going to have my lawyer Bob freeze her accounts today," Declan declared, taking a vengeful bite of the omelette. "Just to speed up the process." "That's my ruthless CEO," Kendra purred, kissing his cheek. "Now about today, I was thinking we could go shopping. I saw the most divine diamond necklace at Tiffany & Co. A sort of freedom present." Declan's mood lifted. This was what he wanted. A beautiful, adoring woman who knew her place, who appreciated the things he could give her. He spent the morning indulging Kendra, buying the necklace and several other extravagant items, the transactional nature of their relationship a comforting balm to his bruised pride. He was in control. He was the king. He returned to his office at the Shaw Innovations headquarters in the early afternoon, feeling powerful and vindicated. His secretary, A nervous young man named Paul greeted him with a stack of messages. "Good afternoon, Mr. Shaw. Your wife's lawyer, a Miss Evelyn Albright, called. She said it was urgent." Declan scoffed. "Let her leave a message. Rowena is probably trying to negotiate her allowance. Pathetic." He strode into his magnificent corner office, a room with a panoramic view of the city, a view Rowena had specifically designed to make him feel like a titan. He sat in his leather chair and tried to log into the company's central server to review the Q3 financials. Access denied. He frowned and tried again. Access denied. User privileges revoked by system administrator. "What the hell?" he muttered. He buzzed Paul. "Paul, I can't get into the server. What's going on?" "I don't know, sir," Paul stammered. "The entire executive suite is locked out. It is scrambling, but they said the lockout is tied to the building's core operating system, not the company network. It's some kind of architectural protocol. They said only the original system architect has the master key." A cold dread began to seep into Declan's bones. Architectural protocol. Original system architect. Rowena. His private line rang. It was Bob Friedman, his chief legal counsel. "Declan, we have a problem," Bob said, his voice strained. "A big one. I just got off the phone with Evelyn Albright. She represents your wife." "So what?" "She wants the house. She can have it. I'll buy a bigger one," Declan blustered. "It's not about the house, Declan. It's about the company. It's about this building. It's about everything. She's invoking the intellectual and creative property clause in your prenuptial agreement." Declan's mind went blank. "The what? What the hell is that?" Bob sighed, a sound of pure exasperation. "It's Addendum 4, Section B. You signed it 12 years ago. It stipulates that all of Rowena's architectural patents and designs remain her exclusive property. The licensing agreement for their use by Shaw Innovations was contingent on the marriage being intact. Albright is claiming that your actions last night constituted a material breach of contract, thereby terminating the agreement, effective immediately." The phone felt slippery in Declan's hand. The panoramic view suddenly felt like it was closing in on him. "What does that mean?" Bob in English. "It means," Bob said, his voice grim, "that as of this moment, Shaw Innovations is illegally occupying its own headquarters. Every minute we are in this building, we are racking up millions in patent infringement damages. She can file an injunction that could shut down our entire physical operations by the end of the day. She holds the kill switch to the company Declan, and her finger is on the button." Declan shot to his feet, a strangled roar of disbelief and fury caught in his throat. He looked around his office, the sleek desk, the powerful computer, the view of his city. It was all built on a foundation. He had never seen a foundation that was now being pulled out from under him. "That's impossible," he yelled into the phone. "She can't do that. She wouldn't dare." But even as he said it, he knew he was wrong. He saw her face from last night, her eyes empty of fear, of love, of anything he recognized. He had slapped a queen believing she was a pawn. And now the board was being flipped, and all his pieces were about to be swept away. His celebration was over. The reckoning had just begun. The lobby of the Shaw Innovations headquarters was a cathedral of modern commerce. A soaring 50-foot atrium of glass and white Italian marble, it was designed to inspire awe and intimidation in equal measure. It was Rowena's design, and today she had returned to reclaim it. At precisely 2:00 p.m., the revolving glass doors slid open, and Rowena Shaw walked in. She was not the same woman who had walked out of the gala the night before. Gone was the elegant but subdued society wife. In her place stood a formidable professional. She wore a sharply tailored charcoal grey suit, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. Her face was pale and composed, the faint bruise on her cheek, visible not as a mark of victimhood, but as a stark, defiant accusation. She was not alone. Flanking her were two figures who immediately drew the attention of the security guards. On her right was Evelyn Albright, her lawyer a woman in her 60s with piercing intelligence in her eyes and a briefcase full of legal dynamite. On her left were two uniformed police officers, their presence a silent, shocking statement. The receptionist, a young woman named Tara, looked up, her eyes widening in recognition and then confusion. "Mrs. Shaw, can I help you? I'm here to see my husband, Declan Shaw." Rowena stated, her voice calm and resonant in the vast space. "And I will not be taking no for an answer." The head of security, a burly ex-cop named Frank, hurried over his expression, a mixture of professional duty and unease. "Mrs. Shaw, is there a problem?" The police are here with me." "Frank," Evelyn Albright interjected smoothly, presenting a file. "This is a formal complaint of domestic assault filed by my client against her husband, Declan Shaw, for his actions last night at the St. Regis. They are here to take his statement." Frank's jaw tightened. He had worked for Declan for years, but he had always respected Rowena. The news sent a shockwave through the lobby. Employees who were walking by slowed their pace, conversations dropping to hushed whispers, the rumor mill already churning since the gala went into overdrive. I'll have to call upstairs," Frank stammered. "You do that," Rowena said coolly. "Tell my husband his wife is here, and she's brought guests." Upstairs in the corner office, Declan was in a full-blown panic. Bob Friedman's call had shattered his reality, and now Paul, his secretary, burst in his face ashen. "Mr. Shaw, it's your wife. She's in the lobby. She's got police with her." Declan felt the floor drop out from under him. Police? For what? The slap. He had barely registered it as anything more than a disciplinary action. The idea that it could have actual legal consequences was something his privileged mind had never conceived. "Don't let her up here," he roared, pacing his office like a caged animal. "Frank is to keep her in the lobby." "It's too late, sir," Paul squeaked. "Ms. Albright is citing shareholder access rights, and the police are citing a criminal complaint. They're coming up." The chime of the private executive elevator sounded down the hall, a death knell. Declan's bravado evaporated, replaced by a primal fear. He looked wildly around the office that was no longer truly his. His kingdom was being invaded. The double doors to his office suite were pushed open. Rowena entered first, her stride confident, her eyes scanning the room as if refamiliarizing herself with her own creation. Evelyn Albright and the two officers followed, their expressions grim and professional. "Declan," Rowena said, her voice devoid of any emotion. It was the voice of a stranger. "What is the meaning of this?" Declan blustered, trying to regain some semblance of authority. "Get these people out of my office. You can't just barge in here." "Actually, she can." "Evelyn," Albright said, placing her briefcase on his large mahogany desk with a decisive thud. "As a 50% partner in the holding company that owns this property, she has every right to be here. As for the officers, they have a few questions for you regarding assault charges." One of the officers, a Sergeant Miller, stepped forward. "Mr. Shaw, we've received a credible report of an assault that took place last night. We'd like you to accompany us to the precinct to give a statement." "This is ridiculous. It was a private marital dispute," Declan sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. "A dispute that left a mark, Mr. Shaw." Sergeant Miller said, his gaze flicking to Rowena's cheek. "And had dozens of witnesses." Declan was trapped. The legal threat from the prenup was abstract financial. But this, the police, the uniform, the threat of handcuffs was real, immediate, and humiliating. He saw his picture on the front page of the tabloids, the mugshot next to the headline, "Tech Tycoon Arrested for Beating Wife." "This is a shakedown," he snarled, pointing a trembling finger at Rowena. "You want money, is that it? Fine, name your price. How many millions do you want to make this all go away?" Rowena almost smiled, a cold, bitter curve of her lips. "You still don't get it. Do you, Declan? You think everything can be bought. You think everyone has a price. I'm not here for your money. I'm here for what's mine." As if on cue, the elevator chimed again. All heads turned as the doors slid open. A man stepped out, tall and impeccably dressed in a bespoke Savile Row suit. He radiated an aura of quiet, unshakable power that made Declan's brash dominance seem cheap and theatrical. His face was calm, his eyes sharp and analytical. He walked into the office, his gaze falling first on Rowena, a look of profound respect and support passing between them. Then he turned his attention to the sputtering, cornered man behind the desk. "Declan Shaw," he said, his voice a smooth baritone with a faint British accent. "A pleasure to finally meet you. My name is Gideon Kincaid." The name hung in the air, heavy with consequence. Declan knew the name. Everyone in the world of global finance and development knew the name. Kincaid Global was a titan, an industry-devouring leviathan. The realization hit Declan with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a domestic dispute anymore. This wasn't a simple divorce. This was a corporate execution. And his wife, the woman he had slapped and discarded, was holding the axe. The arrival of Gideon Kincaid shifted the atmosphere in the room from a tense confrontation to a strategic demolition. Declan Shaw stared at him, his mind struggling to process this new catastrophic variable. Kincaid Global. Here why? Kincaid. Declan stammered the name, tasting like ash in his mouth. "What are you doing here?" Gideon didn't answer him directly. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the city. "Remarkable design, this building," he said, his voice conversational. "A perfect balance of form and function. The curtain wall system is particularly ingenious. Achieves a level of energy efficiency that is frankly about a decade ahead of its time. I've followed the architect's work for years. A true visionary." He turned back, his gaze settling on Rowena with undisguised admiration, before finally looking at Declan. "You, of course, know the architect intimately." The implication was clear, and it was a direct shot at Declan's stolen credit. "Get to the point, Kincaid," Declan snarled, feeling his power slipping away with every passing second. "Very well," Gideon said, his tone shifting to one of cold corporate precision. He gestured towards Evelyn Albright. "Ms. Albright, if you would." Evelyn opened her briefcase and laid 2 documents on Declan's desk. "The first," she explained, "is a cease and desist order. It demands that Shaw Innovations immediately vacates these premises due to ongoing and willful patent infringement. As we speak, our associates are filing an emergency injunction with the federal court to freeze all company assets pending a damages hearing. Our initial estimate for damages is in the realm of $2 billion, not including punitive measures." Declan felt the blood drain from his face. $2 billion. That would gut the company. That would be the end of everything. The second document, Gideon continued, stepping forward, is an offer, a way out of this unfortunate situation. Declan stared at the paper, his hands trembling. It was a term sheet. The letterhead was Kincaid Global. My company Kincaid Global is prepared to make an offer to acquire a 51% controlling stake in Shaw Innovations, Gideon stated. The offer price is, I'm afraid, significantly below your current market valuation. In fact, it's 30 cents on the dollar. A fire sale, you might say. Given that your company's value is set to evaporate the moment the markets open tomorrow and news of this injunction breaks, I consider it a very generous offer. It was a hostile takeover executed with surgical, brutal efficiency. Declan was being checkmated. You can't do this, he raged. This is my company, I built it. Did you? Rowena spoke for the first time since Gideon's arrival. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through Declan's blustering. You had an idea, Declan. A good one, I'll admit. But I designed the space where that idea grew. I created the environment that attracted the talent. I hosted the dinners, charmed the investors, and smoothed over your brutish impulses. You laid a few bricks, but I was the architect. And you seem to have forgotten the most important rule of construction. A weak foundation can't support the weight of a skyscraper. She stepped up to the desk, standing beside Gideon, a united front. There are, of course, conditions to this acquisition, Gideon added smoothly. Condition 1, all criminal and civil charges against you related to last night's events are to be settled immediately. My legal team will draft a settlement so airtight you'll never be able to contest it. It will include a public apology. Condition 2. Gideon continued, his eyes like chips of ice. You, Mr. Shaw, will be removed as CEO. You will retain a minority shareholding, but will have no operational control and no seat on the board. You will be given a meaningless title, founder and chief visionary officer perhaps, and an office in the basement. Declan looked as if he'd been physically struck again this time by Gideon's words. The humiliation was absolute. And the third and most important condition, Gideon said, turning his gaze back to Rowena. Mrs. Shaw, or rather Ms. Rowena Vance, as she will be known professionally from now on, reclaiming her maiden name, will be appointed to the new board of directors. Furthermore, Kincaid Global will fund the creation of a new independent subsidiary under the Shaw Innovations umbrella. It will be called Vance Designs, and it will focus on sustainable architectural technology and smart city integration. Ms. Vance will be its president and CEO with full autonomy and a budget that will make her a global leader in the field. The sheer audacious brilliance of the plan left Declan speechless. They weren't just taking his company. They were using its shell to build a new empire for Rowena right before his eyes. He would be a ghost haunting the halls of his own former kingdom, forced to watch daily as the wife he abused became more powerful and respected than he ever was. This is insane, he whispered, slumping into his chair, the fight draining out of him. It's business, Gideon corrected him. You of all people should understand that. You once told your wife that in business you see what you want and you take it. No apologies, no hesitation. We are simply following your advice. The final piece of the gambit was yet to come. The doors to the office opened again. This time, it was not a person who entered, but a disruption. Kendra Lowell, dressed in designer clothes paid for by Declan, sashayed in, oblivious to the corporate execution underway. Declan, honey, I got bored waiting in the car, she began, then stopped, taking in the scene. The police officers, the stern-faced lawyer, the powerful stranger, and Rowena looking not like a victim, but a conqueror. Kendra's finely tuned survival instincts went on high alert. The balance of power in the room was palpable, and Declan was on the losing side. Her eyes darted from Declan's defeated slump to Gideon Kincaid's expensive suit and confident posture. What's going on?" she asked, her voice losing its seductive purr. Declan looked at her, his last hope for an ally. "Kendra, tell them it was nothing. A misunderstanding." Kendra looked at the term sheet on the desk, at the faces of the officers, at the unyielding expression on Rowena's face. She saw her future, the money, the fame, the access evaporating. Her allegiance was not to Declan the man, but to Declan the millionaire. A millionaire who was about to be royally downsized. She took a small step back away from Declan, a subtle but definitive shift. I don't know what he's talking about," she said, her voice small and shaky, playing the victim. "He was very aggressive last night. It was frightening. I think I'd like to speak with the officers. Privately." It was the final perfect betrayal, the last nail in Declan's coffin, hammered in by the very person for whom he had sacrificed everything. Declan Shaw stared at her, his mouth agape, understanding at last the true nature of the world. He had built a world of transactions where loyalty was just another commodity to be bought and sold. And today, his stock was worthless. The silence that followed Kendra's defection was profound. It was the sound of a king being stripped of his crown, his robes, and his last ally in his own throne room. Declan looked from Kendra's calculatedly fearful face to Gideon's impassive one, and finally to Rowena. In her eyes he saw no triumph, no gloating. He saw only a calm, dispassionate finality, like an architect viewing a completed demolition. Sergeant Miller, seeing his opportunity, stepped toward Kendra. "Ma'am, if you'd like to give a witness statement, we can take it right now." He subtly positioned himself between Kendra and Declan, a clear signal that the power dynamic had irrevocably changed. Declan was no longer the untouchable titan. He was a suspect. Kendra, seeing her path to a new narrative, nodded eagerly. "Yes, I think I should." She was escorted out of the office, not even giving Declan a backward glance. Her story would be on every gossip blog by morning, the terrified mistress who witnessed the tycoon's brutish nature. She was already salvaging her own brand from the wreckage. Declan was alone, utterly and completely alone, surrounded by the architects of his downfall. He deflated the rage and bluster draining away to leave a hollowed-out man. He stared at the term sheet from Kincaid Global. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a surrender document. "You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow, when the markets open, to sign." Gideon said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "If you sign, we present this as a strategic merger, a bold new direction for Shaw Innovations. Our PR team is already drafting the press release. Your reputation, while damaged, may survive in some form. If you do not sign, Ms. Albright will file the injunction. The patent infringement lawsuit will be made public. The assault charges will be pursued to the fullest extent of the law. Your company will be bankrupt by noon, and you will likely be facing jail time. The choice is yours." Declan picked up a pen, his hand shaking so violently he could barely hold it. He looked at Rowena one last time, a desperate, pathetic appeal in his eyes. He was searching for a flicker of the woman who had once loved him, the partner who had stood by him. He found nothing. "Why, Rowena?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "After all I gave you." Rowena finally took a step toward him, her shadow falling across his desk. "That's your mistake, Declan. You never gave me anything. You took my talent and called it your own. You took my support and called it your due. You took my love and ground it into dust. You didn't give me this life. You used my life to build yours. The things you bought me weren't gifts. They were wages, and your payments have stopped. She gestured to the papers. This isn't revenge. This is a structural correction, a realignment. You built a faulty structure on a stolen foundation. I'm simply condemning the building and starting over with the original plans. With that, she turned her back on him. She had said everything she needed to say. There was nothing left but the paperwork. She walked with Gideon and Evelyn towards the elevator. As the doors opened, she paused and looked back at the office at the man who was now a prisoner in a cage of her own design. She felt a strange sense of detachment, not of joy, but of peace. The heavy weight she had been carrying for years was finally gone. "Are you all right?" Gideon asked quietly as the elevator doors closed, whisking them away from the scene of the demolition. Rowena looked at her reflection in the polished steel doors. She saw the faint bruise on her cheek, but for the first time, she also saw the woman she was meant to be. Strong, brilliant, and finally free. "Gideon," she said, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. "I'm just getting started." The next morning, the business world was rocked by a stunning announcement. Kincaid Global had acquired a controlling stake in Shaw Innovations. The press release, a masterpiece of corporate spin, spoke of a visionary partnership positioning the move as a brilliant fusion of technology and sustainable development. Declan Shaw, it was noted, would be stepping down as CEO to explore new creative ventures, while the board welcomed a new member, the renowned architectural designer Rowena Vance, who would spearhead an exciting new subsidiary, Vance Designs. The tabloids, meanwhile, had a different story. They ran photos of Declan looking haggard, alongside quotes from a terrified Kendra Lowell about his volatile temper. The narrative was set Declan was out a disgraced brute. Rowena was in a brilliant woman reclaiming her power. Weeks later, Rowena stood not in a sterile penthouse, but in the bustling, creative chaos of her old loft in the Arts District, now the temporary headquarters for Vance Designs. Young, ambitious architects and engineers buzzed around her, their energy infectious. Her old drafting table was covered in new blueprints, plans for buildings that would not just scrape the sky, but heal the planet. Gideon Kincaid stopped by holding 2 cups of coffee. He was no longer just an investor. He was a partner, a collaborator, a friend. "The board approved your budget for the Shanghai project," he said, handing her a cup. "Unanimously." "They'd be fools not to," she replied with a confident smile, her eyes sparkling with ideas. She looked out the large arched window at the city skyline. Among the towers, the Shaw Innovations headquarters still stood a monument to her past. But now it was just one building among many. Her gaze was fixed on the horizon, on the empty spaces where new things could be built. She had torn down her gilded cage, and in its place, she was designing a future with an unshakable foundation, a foundation that was entirely her own. And so Rowena's story reminds us that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. She proved that true strength isn't about shouting the loudest, but about knowing the foundation of your own worth. Declan Shaw built his empire on arrogance and theft, and it crumbled like sand. Rowena built her new world on talent, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of self-respect. Her victory wasn't just in taking back her power, but in redesigning her entire life on her own terms. What did you think of Rowena's incredible comeback? Do you believe Declan got what he deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of justice and empowerment, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own strength, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories. Your support helps us bring these powerful narratives to light. Thank you for listening.